Thank you very much, Pooja, and it's a pleasure to be in Pune. Thank you, Anurag. Thank you, Prakash, for such a lovely introduction. Thank you, Arunaji, for sharing, the love of books, Time, Newsweek, and Economist. I mean, and in the BSF library, you also got the Times Literary Supplement. So these were some of the things which supplemented the Illustrated Weekly of India and Sunday. And I'm very happy that, we are all here today, this morning. Devika had sent those map slide, so we could have that as well. So taking on from that 10 into 10 into 10, I think it's also important to read 10 lines from your book, because even if people buy the book, the possibility of reading the book is just about 10% or less than 10%. 20%? Okay.
Only 20% of the books
that are bought or read. And the possibility of having read through the whole book is even less. Therefore, I have now decided to first read the most significant parts of my book, so that for those who may get the book but may not get the time to read it, so what I've done is that I have looked at the maps of India from 1947 to 2019. And the process was, and when I was working on this project, Matangi and I were also on a committee, and she could perhaps see the maps behind my workstation at the Mussoorie Academy. So what happened was, and I need to tell you this story about how this happened. You see, we had taken the officers of the 2000 batch of the IAS to the Survey of India at Dehradun to see how the survey techniques have evolved over the years, because 36 years ago, we had those Gunter chains and you had the theodolite survey, and it was a fairly complex thing measuring land, especially because land is undulating. Now today it's become very easy because you have a satellite imagery, you have drones, and you have so many things. So while they were looking at the new technologies on survey, I just happened to go to the Museum of the Survey of India, and I started looking at the maps of India. And the first map which was produced in India by then the Survey of India was called the Survey of Bengal. That was the year 1796, when Hastings was the Governor General of the East India Company. So that's what triggered the imagination. And then every time the East India Company would acquire a new territory, the map changed. I mean, they expanded the map. And so that kept happening, and I realized that I can't do so much. But I started looking at the map of India in 1947, then the map of India in 50, then the map of India in 52, 53, 54, 56, because every time the internal boundaries of the nation have changed. Every time a state gets a new name, and that's very common, when Odisha will become Odia. And Odisha will become Odisha, for example. And when Odisha becomes Odisha, there'll be a new map, So this is what keeps happening. So obviously, I can't take you through all the maps. There are about 80 changes in the map of India from 47 to 2019, when Jammu Kashmir got reorganized. But I'll take you through some of the more significant maps. But before I do that, because what happens is that when I start discussing and showing maps, I can never reach the conclusion, because you get so caught up in the map that is current. So I have now decided to first give you the conclusions, or not conclusions really, because you can never really have conclusions in history, because every time new information is coming up, new insights are coming up, new documents are coming up. And let me tell you that one of the best sources, open source material on India, is actually the exchange which takes place between the High Commissioner of Britain and the 3 deputies with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. It's no secret. But every fortnight they have to write a letter, or they have to give their synopsis of what has happened in India, and they send it to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and 40 years later that record is declassified. And therefore, the most important events in the last fortnight, along with the newspaper cuttings of the important newspapers or whatever these 4 gentlemen and lady in India think, that goes and gets stored in the FCO. You also get records from all the other foreign missions. So that is a very interesting and a very fairly objective way of looking at our history, especially the reconstruction of history during those very crucial years. Okay, so let me just read these 10 lines. Are there any lessons from this study? Yes. First and foremost is the fact that the notion of identity is fluid. You know, all of us carry multiple identities, but the notion of identity is not cast in stone. You know, a generation ago, I was a Punjabi. Then you come and settle in Uttarakhand. My children are born in Uttarakhand. You know, my wife is from UP. So all of us will now carry many identities. Fortunately for India, where the national anthem says Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravid, Utkal, Banga, it is possible to have multiple identities. So I think somewhere along our history, somewhere along the way, the nation has been created, multiple identities are part of being Indian. And that is so great, because where identities are not recognized, where languages are not respected, where diversity is not taken as the given and as a platform to be celebrated, nations break. You have USSR, you have Czechoslovakia, you have Yugoslavia, closer home you have Pakistan, which has broken up because we've not been able to recognize. And the strength of India is that we've believed in our diversity. In fact, you know, a lot of times questions asked, where do you start the history of India? We can start the history from 1947. We can start the history of India from 1858. We could start the history from the Battle of Plassey. We could start the history from the Third Battle of Panipat, Second Battle of Panipat, First Battle of Panipat, from the time when the Arab invasion, when the first Arabs came and took over Sindh. Where do we start a history from? That's a very important question. So I had to draw an arbitrary line at 15th August. But from the concept of Bharat, because my book is called We the People of the States of Bharat, to distinguish it from the provinces which were in India. The first map of India, as you will notice, says India, provinces, states, and districts. But on a more philosophical note, the very first verse in the Bhagavad Gita is, when Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, he says, Sanjaya, please tell me, which are the armies which are there in Kurukshetra? Which are the armies on the Kaurava side, I mean, my son's side, and which are the armies on the side of the Pandus? And then he goes on to tell him there is Kasi Raj here, there is this Raj here, Gandhar is there, this is so. It also shows that even in that larger concept of Bharat stroke Mahabharat, the different dhwajas or the different flags or the different armies, they were all part. I mean, that distinction was being recognized, acknowledged, and to a large extent celebrated. Okay, so the identity of the concept of identity. Second was the fact that language usually gets people together, but scripts can divide people, as in the case of Punjab and as in the case of Sindh. The scripts became a very divisive tool. Third, that there is a considerable difference in the way pan-Indian parties look at issues and the way a state or a regional party would look at issues. And when the regional issues come to the fore, no political party can enforce its diktat. Take the case of Maharashtra. In 1960, neither the Congress, nor the CPI, nor the Jana Sangha, which were three very important parties, very different in their outlook, but none of them wanted the reorganization of Bombay. But legislators cut across party lines and they made the SMM, the Samyukta Maharashtra movement. So political parties may think one thing, but the ground level workers will do exactly what they think the man on the street wants them to do. The classic case is the old pension scheme and the new pension scheme. The new pension scheme, started by Manmohan Singh, started by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, ran its way through the UPA, ran its way through the NDA, and yet, you know, the ground level workers want something else. Next, there's a gap between what the English press says, what the Hindi press says, and what the regional press says. The big difference between these three perceptions. All of these perceptions are very significant. The opposition to an idea can come from the most unexpected source. So you think that and that's something that perhaps the business can also understand, that you run a thing, you run your whole analysis of this is where the opposition would come from. Opposition can come from the craziest and from those quarters which you never thought would have happened. Next significant point is that populations keep moving, therefore demographics changes. And when demographics is affected, certain geographies get political change. Ninth, and very significant, is that 6 or 7 decades, Prakash said, I'm a grandfather, many of us sitting here. So we think we've spent 6 years, 7 years. We think we are old, not ancient, but old. But for the life of a nation, what is 6 decades? A nation has to look in terms of centuries. But civilizations have to look at themselves in terms of millennia, right? Therefore, perspectives of time also keep changing. And with this little background, let's move on to the first map of India, which is what India was in 1947. You have this yellow areas, which are the princely states of India. Now, these princely states of India were 48% of India's area and about 10 crore population of the 40 crore population that we had. So 10 crore was here, about 5.5 crores was in million, sorry, there was in Bangladesh, and another 4 in what is now called Pakistan. 30 crores was in the rest of British India. So at that point of time, the big challenge was how do you look at India? The Britishers wanted us to call ourselves the dominions of Hindustan and Pakistan. They did not want us to use the word India, because in their conception of things, British India would be broken up into 2 parts, into 2 units, Hindustan and Pakistan. More than Sardar Patel, it was Mr. Menon, the bureaucrat, the sharp bureaucrat that he was, who realized that if we were to call ourselves Hindustan, then we have to renegotiate all our treaties in all the international agencies. We shall call ourselves India. And that is very important, because we are India and Pakistan is now the breakaway part, right? Otherwise, we would both have been sort of, India has broken up into 2. Now, by calling yourself India, you are India. So you retain what India was, and there is a breakaway part, which is Pakistan. Within 3 years, Sardar Patel ensured that the map of India gets reorganized, because each of these 562 states, except for 21 gun salute states of Jammu Kashmir, Hyderabad, and Mysore, they are merged with neighboring states, either made into unions of states, or can we have the next map, please? Or they are, organized, they are merged. Some of them become chief commissioners, provinces. But this is what India looks like in 1950. And the name that you get is India States under the new constitution. Remember, because it's the first time, so the word new constitution is used, because it's a new thing that you've done. But what I want to show you here is that both in the 47 map and in the 50 map, there is no China on the map of India. We have not used the word China to describe our northern border. We are using the word Tibet. In the first map, we said it is undefined territory, because that Gilgit-Baltistan area, and then we use the word Tibet and not China. Now, by this time, the states have been reorganized into, states under Raj Pramukhs, which are the old Part B states, and you have states under the governors. Now, getting these 562 people together was not an easy thing, because some of them could become Raj Pramukhs, but what about the others? So we said, all right, use the British method of saying, all right, if you are the Raj Pramukh, you become the Upraj Pramukh. You become the Kanishth Upraj Pramukh. You become the Jesht Upraj Pramukh. So we created several of these, high-sounding titles meaning nothing, but we kept them all going, so that this is what happened from 47 to 50. So you had some semblance of, so this map of India becomes more recognizable because the states have disappeared, right? Incidentally, I must mention here that Hyderabad was a cut above the other states, because Hyderabad was called His Exalted Highness. The other highnesses were only His Highnesses, but Hyderabad was called His Exalted Highness because of 2 reasons. One, he gave a lot of money to the Britishers in First World War. And second, the Britishers needed a firman for him to inspire or to sort of endorse the Muslim troops to go and fight in the First World War against Turkey, because the Muslim troops were not willing to go and fight against the Khalifa. But Nizam, a very clever man, of course, the richest man of the world, his successor died a few days. But, while he was issuing fatwas against telling the soldiers to go and fight, later on, both his son and nephew, sons were married to the daughters of the Khalifa. But that's another story. Incidentally, I must also place on record that Mr. Jinnah hated the Nizam of Hyderabad and hated Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah the most, because in Mr. Jinnah's conception of things, the 2 people who were challenging his position as the sole spokesperson of the Indian Muslims were Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah, who at that point of time was a democratic secular leader. See, when we look at the trajectory of leadership of people, we have to give them credit for what they were at particular points of time. Later on, people change their perspectives, but we must recognize that Abdullah in 1935 had joined the Indian National Congress also. He was the president of the All India States People's Congress, which was an affiliate of the Indian Congress. When I talk about the Congress, I'm talking about that Congress in which there was dual membership. You were a member of the Hindu Mahasabha and you were a member of the Congress. Lajpat Rai, Madan Mohan Malviya. You were an Akali leader and you were a member of the Congress. You were a Muslim leaguer and you were also a member of the Congress till a later time when this separation happened. Okay, let's move on. Next map is the map of 1952. 1952 is the first Hindi map of India. Now, when the first Hindi map, can we move on to the next map, please? The first Hindi map of India is significant for 2 or 3 reasons. We have to move to the next map. Okay. Now, you see here, I want you to see that there are no changes in territory, but the word China appears on the top of our map. For the first time, therefore, you get the word China on the map of India, because India does not recognize Tibet and Tibet does not recognize India. Now, this has very long-term strategic implications, because now when we talk about the McMahon line or we talk about other things, the fact is that for a long period of time, we started recognizing China, and therefore it sort of affects the way we can negotiate with them. Later on, you will see that Tibet disappears from the map of India. By 1958, Tibet is no longer on the map of India, you only have China. So, 1952, this happens. Let's move on to the next map because I must pick up speed. In 1952, the first linguistic agitation started in the country when Potti Sriramallu died after a major hunger strike in Andhra Pradesh. Remember that the Congress had always accepted the principle that India will be reorganized on linguistic lines. Because the Congress had started organizing itself on linguistic lines in 1918. We had the Sindh Congress, we had the Bangla Congress, we had the Karnataka Congress, we had the Tamil Congress. So the 4 great people in Indian politics, Ambedkar, Gandhi, Patel, Nehru, all of them were convinced that India has to be reorganized on linguistic lines. After partition, such was the impact that we sort of put it on the back burner, but it came back. And then 53, Andhra State 1.0, that is Andhra State and Hyderabad were 2 Telugu-speaking states that came up. Hyderabad was a multilingual state. But with the Andhra State being made, we also got the States Reorganization Commission, which then led to the formation of the 4 southern states. The states which were not reorganized were Bombay, Assam and Punjab, where people did want to have separate states. And the argument which was used by the States Reorganization Commission was that the first line of defense on the international border is the state armed police. So you can't have a very small state. You need a big state to be able to manage this. And Punjab, incidentally, was also manning the first line of defense in Baramulla and Jammu Kashmir, because Jammu Kashmir police did not really have the strength to do that. So Punjab at that time, the Punjab armed police was manning Lahore, Spiti, Baramulla, right up to Ladakh and Punjab. So that's the reason why this did not happen. But in 60, there was a major agitation. So we had to, the government of India conceded after major agitation, Gujarat and Maharashtra. But once this happened, then it was difficult to start denying the same sort of argument to other places. Incidentally, in 1963, Nagaland was created. When Nagaland was created, that was the first time that the government of India accepted the fact that you can have an unviable state forever. Because Nagaland is never going to be a viable state administratively or financially, right? So that is what happened. And then, but the point to note is that once you have Nagaland, then Mizoram cannot be far behind. So once Nagaland is made, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, all of them would also get their statehood. I'll skip a lot of things at this point of time because we're running out of time, but I must bring to the forum that in 1954, the assemblies of Bengal and Bihar passed a resolution wanting to merge the 2 states. Because when B.C. Roy visited Punjab, 1953 to attend the Congress session in Amritsar, he saw the excellent, let's not use the word excellent, but he saw that the Punjabi refugees had been settled fairly well in the area which is now Haryana. So all of Panipat, Sonipat, Kurukshetra, Gurugram, all this is actually Punjabi rehabilitation, Punjabi refugees happening. But on the other hand, Bangladeshis or Bengalis were sent to Dandakaranya, they were sent to Andaman, some were sent to Odisha, some were sent to Madhya Pradesh, some were sent to UP, and it was very, very chaotic. So B.C. Roy felt that why don't we use this large area of Bihar, and rehabilitate the Bengalis there. So both the assemblies passed the resolution. The Congress was very happy. And one wild guess from where the opposition came from? It came from UP. The Congress of UP realized that if you have a state which is larger than UP, then that is the end of the permanent hegemony of UP over Indian politics. So the opposition did not come from Bengal or Bihar. The opposition to Bihar and Bengal becoming one state comes from another state, which does not want its control over the politics of India to end. And that's a challenge which the asymmetry that we have today amongst the states, and it's going to become even bigger once the delimitation exercise happens. I know I'm running out of time, but you'll have to give me 2, 3, 4 more minutes. Okay. Okay. Oh, so I don't want to eat into your lunch, but anyway. Okay. So then you see what happens is that 61 happens, up 60, this happens, and in 65, after the 65, 1st December, BSF is created. Now, when BSF is created, then the argument that Punjab police will be responsible for defending the borders of Punjab, that argument stops. Now, publicly, Mrs. Gandhi took a lot of credit by saying that I concede to the demands of Sant Fateh Singh and Master Tara Singh and the Akali thing. But the actual reason for the creation of Punjab was that the argument why Punjab could not have been created, that argument had been knocked out by the creation of BSF. So another point about history is that sometimes we think things have happened because of an agitation or something. Things may have happened because something else has taken place, which is not so much in the public domain or the public knowledge. Before that, one important significant point is about the merger of Goa with the rest of the country. And that happened because immediately after the Berlin Wall was established in 1961, clarification was issued that NATO will help each other only in NATO areas. And that was the time when India decided that, all right, we can now move our army, and Goa was liberated in 28 hours. Move on to 71. After that, you had Himachal Pradesh. 72, you had many of these places. The UTs, they became states. But the most significant change is 1975, when Sikkim becomes a part of India. A lot of literature that is written on Sikkim says smash and grab and this and that and that. But let me give you the historical background of why and how Sikkim became a part of India. Sikkim was a Lepcha kingdom, became a Bhutia kingdom. Both of them were, Dalai Lama's sphere of influence. But they were monks, essentially monks, not householders. And therefore, while they were praying, somebody had to cultivate the lands around the monasteries, because even monks have to eat, And they invited Nepali workers to come and cultivate the lands around the monasteries. That was in the year 1870. By 1947, the number of Nepalis in Sikkim, living in Sikkim, was 60%. So the Nepali population in Sikkim far exceeded the population of the Lepchas and the Bhutias, and therefore the Nepali Sikkim Congress wanted a merger with India on day one. Because in the Chogyal scheme of things, there were 20 seats for Nepalis, 20 seats for Lepchas, and 20 seats for Bhutias, which is fine for the Lepchas and the Bhutias, but it's not fair to the Nepalis, who are 60% of the population and are getting only 1/3 of the popular vote in assembly. Therefore, the entire narrative of how Sikkim gets into India, is looked at very differently. And that's another thing about how historians and how contemporary writers look at things. Sunanda Kedatta Ray, for example, wrote that smash and grab because he was a friend of the Chogyal. Next book is written by a Scottish missionary who looks at it from the perspective of Scottish missionaries. The third book is written from the perspective of the administrator over there. The next book is written by the raw person over there who writes to defend the first chief minister, the first elected chief minister of Sikkim. So what it shows in Sikkim is a nice microcosm to understand, to understand that the same story will have many multiple versions. Okay, so this was, and we required an amendment to our constitution, 2 amendments to our constitution, 35th and 36th, to integrate Sikkim to India, because India cannot cede an inch of her territory. India cannot add an inch to her territory. Which brings me to the Teen Bigha corridor. I was the additional district magistrate in Cooch Behar when the 3 bighas of land had to be transferred to Bangladesh. By law, we cannot cede any territory. It went up to the courts. So before the land border agreement happened in 2014, under which officially the Parliament had to allow the transfer of 3 bighas. But I'll tell you about the interim story on how an administrative way was found out. Now, the law says that you cannot hand over your territory. The law does not say that you cannot lease your territory. So from 1992 to 2014, India had leased 3 bighas of land. And from 1996, the President of India was pleased to lease that land for 999 years at a lease rent of ₹1 per year, which the President decided to waive off in the interest of India-Bangladesh friendship. So that happened till 1990, so what I want to share is that if you want to solve a problem, when we want to solve a problem, we can always find a way. And we don't want to solve a problem, we can say, look, the Parliament doesn't want it to happen, this can't happen or that can't happen. But after Indira Mujib had agreed that this has to be done, and whenever there's a good government in Bangladesh, you want to give some concessions. Anyway, to cutting a long story short, we now come to 2000, where 3 new states of Uttarakhand, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh are created, by which time the opposition of the Janasangha and the BJP to smaller states has gone. But I must place on record that the BJP is very opposed to the use of the word Khand before any state. Therefore, when Jharkhand was being made, they wanted to call it Vananchal. And they wanted to call Uttarakhand as Uttaranchal. They're nice sounding names, but the public sentiment was with the word Jharkhand and with the word Uttarakhand. And therefore, in spite of what the leadership might want, the people were keen on the word Uttarakhand and Jharkhand. And that is why, in spite of what a dominant political party might want, what the people on the ground wanted was what was accepted. Then you have 2014, Telangana, when Telangana gets created. Telangana's creation also gives us this whole idea that a state, a language other than Hindi can also have 2 political formations, right? So once Telangana is done, now you cannot logically argue against Vidarbha region. You can't logically argue against the North Bengal region up of Malda. You cannot argue logically against non-Hindi speaking states, non-Hindi speaking languages having the separate state. Move on to the last slide, please, in which we have Jammu Kashmir reorganized into Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir. Now, Jammu and Kashmir, if you notice, now when Ladakh at the time, this is not the last map. This is not the last. We'll have to go last slide. Yes, here. Now you see what happens with this is that Ladakh now becomes the crest of India. So now, earlier you used to say Kashmir to Kanyakumari, India is one. Now you will say Ladakh to Lakshadweep, India is one. Now even symbolically it has made a major difference. And what happens is that when you look at a map and you look at a very big place, I mean, not that the problem has become less, but the graphics of the problem have certainly become less. So if you have a very large Jammu Kashmir and you say there's a problem in Jammu Kashmir, then you feel that, oh, such a large area has a problem. Now that Kashmir has become much smaller, it is not that the problem has become smaller. The problem also has become smaller because of 370, but at least visually it appears that, the problem is only in this little part of the country. But incidentally, I must say that the Ladakh Buddhist Association had, as long back in 1948, said that we do not want to be part of Kashmir. We want to be part of the Lahaul-Spiti area. And please join Ladakh, Lahaul-Spiti area, Teri Garhwal, Pauri Garhwal, and make a nice Himalayan kingdom on the borders of Tibet, which will carry a lot of that Tibet, cultural influence. Incidentally, I must mention here that the name of Kashmir, Mr. Bhaku is here, or he's not here at the moment. The name of Jammu Kashmir actually was Jammuwa, Kashmirwa, Ladakhwa, Tibetha. So the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir had imagined that the state of Jammu Kashmir is actually the state of Jammu Kashmir with 4 states in it. Why? How we got to a sky chin is again a very interesting story, and then I'll close. That story is because in 1803, the Britishers, through their treaty with Ranjit Singh, did not want him to cross the Satluj River. Because he could not cross the Satluj River, therefore the Khalsa army moved up. And because the Khalsa army moved up, what could they conquer? They conquered Kabul and they went to Kashmir, and they went beyond Kashmir. So they conquered Gilgit, Baltistan, and a sky chin. So our claim to a sky chin is based on the Khalsa army, and that is based on the fact that the British did not want Ranjit Singh to cross the Satluj. So events in history are very, very interesting, and history is always in the making. It was a real pleasure to interact with all of you. Thank you so much, Anurag, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Actually, there is a resolution in UP which talks about the reorganization of UP into 4 states. Nobody has changed that resolution. That resolution was passed under the regime of Mayawati. Nobody opposed it. Nobody has said that it should not be done, but it has not been done so far. Most likely, after the census and after the delimitation, there will be a major demand from the southern states that you cannot have such asymmetry between states where one state will get 100 MPs in the Lok Sabha and the next state would get less than 50 MPs. So I think that will be the time when we'll really need to look at the reorganization of states from the point of view of symmetry of power, because let's also understand that it's getting very contested. I mean, different regions are growing at different levels. So that is point number 1. Second, my argument is that while a very, very small state may not be very viable, but mid-sized states like Uttarakhand, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Telangana, in fact, both Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, both their rates of growth are better than when Andhra was together. The rates of growth of UP and Uttarakhand also show the same example. And, some states were made to settle political issues like Nagaland, Manipur, Tripura. They cannot be viable. But for a very large nation to be able to spend a few 100 crore rupees to maintain political stability is quite all right. That's the way I would look at it. And Maharashtra and Vidarbha, I mean, if there is a movement, you see, it will all depend on leadership, it will depend on sense. It can happen. I'm not saying it will happen day after tomorrow, but it can happen. Historians are very bad at projecting the future. Once it is done, I'll say the seeds were in this book, but I will not comment at the moment on this.